Good morning, everyone. Leo here from IMS. We're very happy to host this morning's webinar on behalf of SolasVR. Just a little bit of housekeeping before I hand you over to Stephen to kick off the event. We are in webinar format, so we would love you to use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen, and please ask questions because we have a team in the background that will be answering those questions, and we will endeavour to get all those questions answered throughout, and there'll be time for Q&A at the end. So without further ado, I'm going to hand you over to this morning's host, Stephen Pitcher. We'll just unmute you there, Stephen.
Sorry, I'm really sorry about my technical deficiencies. I'm really looking forward to sharing this launch webinar, and hopefully the first of many that we're going to do over the next few months. And I'm particularly delighted to say that we're joined by James Watson and Dr. Celine Mullins, who are experts in their field. And I'll talk a little bit about them just in a sec. But just to run through what we're going to do, we just have a quick intro. We'll run through the presentation where I'll be talking a little bit about what Solas is doing, what wellness is doing in VR, what training is doing in VR, and particularly Celine and James will talk about their experiences and the rationale and the reasons why VR is such a powerful tool in training and in wellness. And then we'll move to a Q&A. So I think, as Leo said, if you have any questions, please just feed them through, and then we'll deal with them in more detail at the Q&A. And obviously, if there's anything we don't get to, we can talk offline about any questions you may have in more detail. So my name is Stephen Pitcher. I'm the founder of SolasVR. We've been working on this for about 4 years, and we finally launched it, and we're really excited about the feedback that we're getting on it. Celine Mullins, Dr. Celine Mullins, is the founder of Adaptus Training and author of Our Learning Brain. So with 15 plus years of experience as a psychologist working, across sectors, Celine was also one of the first people to start to use virtual reality as a training tool, and has won awards for that. I think one with FBD, the Immersive Sales Star Awards. James is based in London with Immerse Learning, and they have an enterprise VR training platform. James is also heavily involved in the industry, co-chair of the VR AR Association Training Committee, the technology think tank, the steering group for Immerse UK, and has some really interesting case studies on uses of VR. So the first poll that we're going to just ask you to have a look at is, have you tried any VR experiences before? And Leo just launched that poll there, and we just give you an opportunity just to answer that, so just so we know the relative experience of people on the call. And welcome first, as we do that, to people on the call. And I know we've people in, and I'll give a welcome to the guys in the States and Mexico who are going to join us on the recording later. So, okay, I think we'll go on to our next slide there. And just to get us in the mood, I just want to play this little.
Are you ready to find yourself in nature right now? Are you ready to reconnect with yourself? Through the power of cinematic virtual reality, we can transport you to a beautiful beach, forest, lake, or garden. In these stunning scenes, you can lose your concerns, slow down, and find time for yourself. To instantly change your environment and feelings, put on your headset and dive into your journey in nature. You will join our active community of people that live life the way you do. A new opportunity for meaningful connectedness in the form of weekly wisdoms, mindfulness, and content about life. These everyday life hacks and stories will make your world a more beautiful and wonder-filled place. Give yourself the present of time. Take a break in nature, even if you're at the center of the city. discover that you can be more if you give yourself the space to grow. Are you ready to find yourself in nature?
And hopefully now that's put you in the mood just to sit back and relax and to listen to the presenters. One thing we just wanted to say is that VR isn't the future. You know, VR is now. The market is growing quickly. The introduction a few years ago of standalone headsets, which didn't have to be tethered to the PC, the likes of the Oculus Go and the Pico, really made a huge difference, as well as the adaptable headsets. I'll talk about that in a second, which are now readily available and are really high quality. All the predictions just go into mind-blowingly big numbers. One stat there, 2023, commercial use would be 3 times larger than consumer use. This is both a commercial and a retail and individual tool. The global market in 2020, close to 20 billion. The big countries driving this, China and the US, but Europe is catching up. The consumer spend on AR, VR this year, 7 billion. And there's an interesting stat from PwC who are telling us that over the next 10 years, VR and AR, virtual reality and augmented reality, will add $1.5 trillion to the global economy, with about 20% of that for training. And already, companies J&J, Pfizer, Dell, so many, PwC, we'll talk about them, Shell, DHL are using this technology in their training and in their wellness programs. Just a word on how we deliver the content, whether it's SolasVR or training content. There's 2 ways of doing it really. One is the standalone headsets, and what you're seeing there is a Pico with a handheld controller, where you deliver directly from the cloud to the headset, either from the company's cloud servers or through the Oculus or the Pico stores. And then the content and the app sits on those headsets. And you can do that in kiosk mode. So for corporates, if you only want people to use the headset for the applications that you have approved, well, then you can do that. So while they have Wi-Fi capability in them, you can shut that down and only give access to the content you want to give access to. And then the other way of delivering it is through the adaptable headsets, which are the headsets that we put the mobile phone into. So you deliver the content over the mobile phone and put the phone into the headset. You see at the front where it says the ShineCon, that flap folds down, the phone goes in, you have adjustable lenses and all that kind of thing, and good quality headsets. So there's lots of different ways of delivering this, either in the office or at home. It's a really flexible technology and platform. So just to start to focus in on healthcare and training, why does VR work? And Celine will talk a lot more about this, but really what it does is it creates a visceral and an emotional experience. So first of all, because it's immersive, you get improved concentration levels. So training and wellness is delivered much more powerfully because we've no distractions. The emotional connection creates improved memory retention. It's like muscle memory is being stimulated. And also what it does is, because of all that, it increases receptivity. So whether we're delivering wellness or training messages, people are, programmed, they're ready to take these messages on board. There's a couple of case studies we want to run through. The first one I'll ask James to talk about, which is training and technical skills. Then we talk a little bit about what PwC have done in the UK, and then we talk about some of the clinical use that VR has been put to, just so we can understand the landscape. So James, I'll hand over to you just to talk about the work that you've done with Shell over the last few years.
Thanks, Stephen. Thanks very much. Hi, everyone. As Stephen said, so CMO at Immerse, and we've done a lot of work specifically in the training arena. So looking a little bit more at kind of what we describe as hard skills. So those skills that are a bit more procedural, where you have to go through a certain number of steps to, get to a specific outcome. Because VR lends itself incredibly well to that, but also, the whole soft skills piece. So it's got a lot of value beyond what I'll talk you through about Shell. It's also got value for leadership training or presentation training, sales training, all sorts of what we would describe as softer skills. And that's also got an important role to play. And of course, where that then leads through to is what SolasVR are doing is the whole sort of wellness piece. And, you know, a lot of the qualities of VR go across hard skills, soft skills, and the wellness piece. So it's quite interesting to think about, you know, why it's good for someone like Shell in very sort of more procedural training, and equally why that is great from a wellness perspective, because people are getting more from the experience. So it's interesting to look across the three buckets. What we did with Shell, I mean, Shell, as everyone will know, huge global organization. For them, it's, you know, the most important thing, the thing that drives their entire business is reducing risk. They are in a fairly high risk industry, and it's to take risk out of the organization. In fact, their goal is zero incidents, you know, and 100% in effect safety for all their staff, be that someone walking down the stairs in an office or someone out on an offshore platform drilling for oil. You know, they view risk across the business as incredibly important. So what VR does for them is, you know, the most important thing for them is it enables them to train people in high risk situations with no risk. It's pretty much as simple as that. They take all risk out of it. Someone can be trained, in effect, what you can see here, you can have someone trained on an offshore platform, which this is purging a gas tank, which is a relatively high risk exercise, not surprisingly. Gas and tanks and things like that generally have quite a high risk associated with them. So it enables them to create these scenarios in virtual reality and put someone through any kind of situation. So in this situation, it's going through an 8-step process to purge the gas tank. Equally, if they wanted to see how someone would react to some sort of explosion around this procedure, you can do that in VR once again, and you can make it feel very real, you know, which comes back again to why it's so impactful in the wellness space as well. So, you know, it's an obvious use of the technology. It's been hugely successful. We've rolled it out across the Shell organization, 8 modules, and it really has had a very strong impact on how they train their staff. So I think if we jump on to PwC slide and talk a little bit about the research they've done in this space. So I talked there about the hard skills. What PwC looked into was more within the sort of soft skills arena. So, you know, classroom training for, you know, something like diversity and inclusion, which is an incredibly hot topic at the moment, or leadership, those sorts of things that are slightly less tangible. You know, they aren't complete these 8 things. They have a less tangible output to them. And the way you can judge the success of those is slightly different. So PwC commissioned a research. It was an internal piece. So I think they had something in the region of 1,600 staff take part in this. And they compared things like, you know, classroom tech training. They would take that classroom training, create a virtual reality version of that training, and see how people performed going through that. And they came out with some really, really interesting results. I think one thing to say with results coming out of VR research is you have to take a slightly filter out the wow factor. You know, for people trying VR, for a lot of them it'll be the first time, it is fantastic. And guess what? They're all going to say it's better than classroom training because it's more fun. Would you rather look at a PowerPoint, or would you rather stick a VR headset on and be absolutely immersed into that environment? So you have to filter for this is amazingly cool tech, and actually get down to more of those meaningful kind of outputs that come out of it. So some of the key things they found, which I think also is very relevant in a wellness context, is, you know, they were, each participant was almost 4 times more emotionally connected to the content than classroom learners. And by that, I mean, people felt, you know, that they could actually identify with it. They felt that it was relevant to them. They felt that they understood it better. So, you know, that's incredibly important. You know, 4 times more sort of engaged in that content. So that's really important. And that also plays out into the sort of 4 times more focused than e-learning. So a really important aspect of VR, be that hard skills, soft skills, or indeed wellness, is you are 100% focused. You put this headset on your face and you can't be distracted. You know, if you're looking at a computer screen, there'll be a colleague over there offering you a cup of tea. There'll be someone who's come in late and you're thinking, oh, why have they come in late? That's a bit odd. All the time, you're not really focused on what you're doing. You put a headset on, you are totally and utterly, you don't have a choice. So therefore, what that means is better retention of information. And if it's in a wellness environment, much deeper immersion. So you really feel like you are wandering across some of those beautiful scenes that Stephen showed us earlier. You know, you are wandering through a field or stood by a river, and therefore you're getting these huge benefits from that. So it was a really, really impactful study. They also, one of the interesting things that we haven't captured here, but is they also found from a cost perspective that it was really effective as well. I think there's quite a perception in the market that VR training is really expensive. And that it's a little bit mystical how you create this content. Well, it's not mystical, it's 3D content. You use a games engine just like any other 3D production house would use. It's not mystical content, it is not hugely expensive. And indeed, PwC found that it was about scale. So once you got to, I think it was 375 trainees, VR training was comparable in cost to classroom training, which I think is really key here. And then once you got to real scale, so I think it was around about 2,000 trainees, at that point, VR was comparable in cost. So if you're training at any kind of scale, VR is actually very, not only cost effective, it is more effective as well. So, you know, it's important to understand that the costs are not exorbitant, and indeed they'll continue to come down. So more effective, cost effective as well. And when you get to that point, then it really becomes a no-brainer. So I think that's the end of my slides, I believe.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks for that, James. And just to tie in with that, PwC are kind of clear about the fact that the training is 4 times faster. So in services organizations, professional services organizations, where time is money, you know, there's a huge benefit to that. And of course, the scalability and the adaptability. People don't have to be in the classroom at 10 o'clock on the 5th floor in the office in London. They can do this anywhere at any time. So to skip on then to stuff that I find fascinating is the use of VR in clinical environments. And one of the first ones I saw on this, and James and I were talking about it the other day, the one on the right-hand side, there's a clinical study in a burns unit that was done about, I think, 3 or 4 years ago now. And if, you know, as you can imagine, changing your dressings in a burns unit is particularly painful experience. And they were basically, you give, in this particular unit, it was focused on children, and you basically give them morphine while they're getting their dressings changed, which is basically you're giving people heroin, which is not necessarily the best thing to be doing. So what they did was that they got a game which was basically throwing snowballs. They allowed the kids to immerse themselves into, you know, VR headset, and the game was throwing snowballs at a snowman and various other targets. And because they're so immersed in that, they were experiencing, you know, 35 to 50% less pain with about the same amount of reduction with the painkillers. So that's an extraordinary win on so many levels for those children. The other, and there's countless examples of this, but the other one that fascinated me was the fear of heights, where the NHS did a study on phobias, and in particular on heights. And what they did basically was, using virtual reality, they take people to you know, different scenarios. They can get near to the height issue, they can back away from it, they can get nearer again, and working with a coach then they were able to address their fears and move on from them. You know, fear of heights reduced by 50%. The Dementia Rescape are based in the UK, and they do a lot of work with dementia patients. And what they find is there's a huge impact of delivering real life experiences. So whether it's just, dementia patients, family, there's extraordinary scenes of the family taking VR footage at weddings or family events, and then allowing the patient then through the headset to experience those events. And it keeps them, it keeps the learning in the brain, it keeps the connection with the family, and produces all sorts of benefits that help in the management of the dementia, and particularly in the reduction of the anxiety of the patient. So really interesting stuff, and we can send on more details around that. Just take a quick poll here, and we just want to ask specifically, given where we're at, has COVID altered your approach to staff wellness and training programs? We'll just give you a little bit of time just to answer that poll, just really for us to check in and to see, what the impact is. And we won't go through 20 questions. It's really a yes or a no, and we can talk maybe offline in more detail about, if it has, what that means, and what potential changes you'd be looking at in the future, and whether or not VR or AR has a role to play there. So we just give you a couple of minutes to do that. And then what we can do is we'll talk a little bit about ourselves, and then we'll introduce Celine to talk a bit around the science around all this. So just to move on. Why did we create this? Well, for me, we created it really to make a difference, on a couple of levels. One is I really like the idea of an Irish company doing something really cool in a new technology. We should be driving the wave of this. We have the people, we have the expertise, we have, whether it's in training or wellness, we have the opportunities to embrace this technology and to become world leaders in it. So I like the idea of creating something unique, and SolasVR is unique. There are other people who do CGI versions of this, but nobody's doing it the way we're doing it, with the nature, the real life nature footage, the choice, the voiceovers. The people who are doing the voiceovers are qualified, experienced therapists, but also trained actors. So, we've put a lot of time and effort into making that right. So we like the idea of an Irish company doing something really cool in this area. We also, another driver was just to normalize the mental health conversation, which COVID is driving anyway, but I think this helps. Talking to people about their experiences in the lake, in the forest, what sounds they liked, what voiceovers they preferred, helps to draw out that conversation. Having headsets available for people, whether in the office, at the coffee station, in the meeting rooms, or having them at home, just makes that whole recognition that mental health and wellness is really important and matters both to the staff and to the company. And we wanted to do it in a way that's just accessible and easy and fun. And one thing, I meditate and I teach meditation, and people forget it's a discipline and it's a practice, and you have to work at it. The beauty about delivering wellness in VR and the way we're doing it is you just have to stick the headset on. I have a friend of mine who says, Stephen, just talk about Star Trek and beam me up and beam me down. This takes you to the planet. It takes you to the lake. It takes you to the forest. And for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, you're there. And you come out recentered, rebalanced immediately. And also over time, of course, you're building resilience. The other driver for us is just bringing nature. I work with nature all the time. I take corporate clients out into nature, and nature does a couple of things. One is it gives us objectivity when we look back on our corporate day, our corporate rows, our corporate challenges and opportunities. It brings that sense of calm and objectivity to our corporate world. It also improves teamwork, funny enough. And it seems to be that when we're in nature, we recognize we're a part of that web. So when we go back to the office, we see ourselves as part of that web, and the fact that somebody else is a marketeer, an accountant, or a production, or older or younger, we pay less heed to those characteristics, and we see them more as a part of a whole. And so relationships improve. So we wanted to address all that, and we wanted to do it in a way that's scalable and in a way that's global, and this enables us to do all that. So it's very immediate, very personal, and very global at the same time. So that's why we're doing what we're doing. And we're passionate about bringing this wellness into people's offices, into their homes, into their kitchens, into their families. So that's why we're doing it. It's a wellness toolkit. You know, stress before COVID was labeled by the World Health Organization as the epidemic of the 21st century. People are time poor. We all know that. And what this does is it gives us a very efficient way in terms of time for people to engage in meditative practices. And it's a safe place to reduce anxiety and to recenter ourselves. Just to talk specifically about COVID, this is a Gallup survey that was carried out, I think in July, maybe beginning of August. 25% of workers don't feel they're ready, emotionally ready, and even the fact that term is in that question, to return to the workplace. Quarter of workers are reluctant to return specifically because of fear of contracting COVID. 77% of workers want to continue working from home. And there's a prediction that 30% of people in the services, the professional services, I suppose the non-manufacturing or operational side will be working from home one way or another. And these are real issues and real fears that people have, whether it's dreading the commute or physically dreading the proximity of being with people in the office. There's real fears that as employers we need to address and to tackle and to find a way through. What we do is, we've touched on most of this, is just combining nature, virtual reality, and micro breaks. This idea that we take 5 minutes to reboot ourselves and recenter ourselves. That's the delivery that we're committing to deliver for people. I'll just show you just maybe a little in-app video of what it's about, and then we'll introduce Celine to talk a little bit about the science around this.
Welcome. Welcome to a place of great natural beauty.
Welcome to another of our weekly wisdom. How do you feel?
Welcome to another exercise in our series of breathing techniques. In this space, we pick a technique, describe its benefits, talk through how to do it.
So that was just a quick view of our in-app experiences, and the range of opportunities we have there, the meditation, the life hacks to help people through specific events, the actual breathing techniques that we have on there to deal with, having to do a presentation or helping us sleep better or dealing with anxiety. And now I'm just going to introduce Celine, who's just going to talk a little bit more about micro breaks and I suppose how this impacts and why that VR is such a powerful tool and such a powerful impact on the mind. So Celine, thank you for that.
Good morning, everyone. And Stephen, thank you for inviting me to be here. And actually, I just want to start with, I was laughing to myself yesterday because I'm in Valencia Island in County Kerry at the moment, having a little break. And yesterday I was walking around, if any of you have been to an area called Bray Head in Valencia Island, and we went up at about 5 o'clock yesterday, and beautiful sunset and looking over the waves and out at the Skelligs, and suddenly a mist started to come down, and we had to walk as quickly as we could back to the car park. And didn't I go over on my ankle? And I thought to myself, Stephen, I had a moment where I thought, I wish my little break that I had taken had been in the headset, going out to see nature. But
it would have been easier, yeah.
It would have been easier, and my ankle would be in a better way today. But yeah, no, I really, last week, Stephen and I were talking about, you know, I had my first experience of all the different elements of in the headset, experiencing nature, experiencing the breathing exercises and the wisdom that Stephen and team have put together. And I guess that it really fell into line with so much of what I've experienced over the last number of years, working in organizations, working with people, working with teams, working with organizations. You know, that really what we really need to do to help and facilitate people's learning and growth, and also just their general workday, what we really need to consider here is our autonomic nervous system. And this is something that we all probably learnt about in first year biology, you know, when we were 12 or 13, but a lot of us have forgotten about. And I just wanted to talk to you very briefly about the autonomic nervous system to get us thinking about how important this is with regard to our working day, because there's a lot of pressure coming on us all the time. And if just to get back to the basics, the autonomic nervous system plays a key role in stress reactivity. It has two main divisions, the first being the sympathetic nervous system and the second being the parasympathetic nervous system. And just to remind you, to take you back to biology class, which some of you will have loved and some of you will have hated, the sympathetic nervous system, it's best known for mediating the neuronal and hormonal stress response, commonly known as fight or flight. So that's when we are experiencing any sort of danger, when we're in fear, we go into that fight or flight. Okay, and then the parasympathetic nervous system counterbalances the sympathetic nervous system and returns the body to its baseline, its natural baseline state after the sympathetic nervous system has been activated. So the parasympathetic is what calms us down. It helps us feel calm and have a composed state. And so, you know, the thing is that the parasympathetic and the sympathetic nervous system, they have opposing but complementary functions. So when the sympathetic nervous system is activated, our heart rate increases, our blood pressure increases, and then a number of hormones are released into our system, such as cortisol increasing. Whereas the parasympathetic nervous system decreases all of these factors. And as I said earlier, brings us back to that sense of calmness. Now, you might be thinking that, okay, right, Celine, yeah, the fight or flight, when are we in danger at work? And of course, depending on your workplace, you know, some of you feel like you're never in danger. But the thing is that the sympathetic nervous system, this fight or flight, can be activated through something as minor as a missed phone call, you know, a missed phone call, a phone call that you were expecting, but you missed, or you see their name come up on the phone and you're thinking, oh, has something gone wrong? Or it could even be activated by a request to change how we perform our role in some way. It could be, you know, our line manager has asked us to do something different. That can activate that fight or flight. Or maybe even a pep talk from somebody that really wasn't welcome. That can activate the fight or flight, the sympathetic nervous system. So if you think about it, because the sympathetic nervous system, the fight or flight, can be activated so easily, think about how many times during your day, your work day, that system has been activated. It's been activated potentially a number of times during every day. And I think during COVID, especially because of the uncertainty, you know, even when we don't know what's happening next, where the sympathetic nervous system has been activated all the time. So it's really important to consider, okay, the sympathetic nervous system is what is activated when we're, you know, when we have to get out of bed in the morning, when the alarm goes off, it gets us out, it gets us started, it gets us focused initially on a challenging task. But research has shown that all of us are more creative and better at handling complex cognitive tasks when the parasympathetic nervous system is activated. And of course, as Stephen's been talking about, if our parasympathetic nervous system is activated, then our health is better as well. So for me, it's about being really conscious as we go through our days, being very, very conscious of our parasympathetic nervous system and our sympathetic nervous system, and thinking, how can I keep moving myself back into my parasympathetic nervous system? So how can I reactivate that? And there's a whole load of different ways of doing that. There's a lot of research been done by neuroscientist Richard Boyatzis, and they're looking at things like meditation, yoga, Tai Chi, being in nature, taking micro breaks, and also, even the impact that our manager can have, our line manager can have on us and our parasympathetic nervous system, and how we will impact on our colleagues and teamwork. So there are so many different activities we can do to break the stress and to reactivate that parasympathetic nervous system. And what's important, what's coming out from research, is that it's about short and regular bursts of breaking the stress. So once a week or once a month is not enough. It's about doing it over and over on a daily basis. And that's why micro breaks, if you want to just go on to the next slide there, Leo, Stephen, and the micro breaks are any activity that break the activity. So whatever we're working on, the monotony of working on a long document, or anything that's physically or mentally draining, if we can take micro breaks last anywhere from a few seconds to several minutes. And even though these breaks are very small, they have a disproportionate, powerful impact. So studies have shown that they can improve our ability to concentrate. They change the way people see their jobs. They help us avoid typical injuries that even just being tied to our desk all day, the back pains and things like this. So micro breaks, and micro breaks are not just getting up from the desk and going and getting a snack or a cup of tea. Micro breaks are much more effective when we actually start focusing on our breath, or when we look at go into nature. But I'll talk a little bit more about nature in a while, and just what's coming out with regard to the research on that, because I know that not all of us have time to go out into nature to take those micro breaks. So just even thinking for yourself now, like, what do I do on a daily basis, at least a number of times a day, to give myself a micro break? Is my micro break just going and getting another cup of tea? Am I doing anything else for myself? And then if we just go on to the nature slide. So, if you think about it, for around 6 or 7 million years, we have evolved in nature, in a natural environment. And so therefore, the physiological functions of our bodies have developed in response to the natural environment. But at the start of the Industrial Revolution in the 18th century, this led to the rapid growth of what we are seeing now: industrialization, urbanization, and this completely changed our living environments. So, and the thing is, so urban environments are still quite unfamiliar to our bodies, because our bodies have been around for such a long time. And the thing is that in 2008, more than half of the world's population lived in urban areas. And it was predicted by 2050 that 69% of humans will live in urban areas. Now, of course, maybe this will change because as a result of COVID-19. But since the late 20th century, nature and the impacts of nature has been gaining a lot of attention in the fields of environmental psychology and in public health. And what we now know, there's evidence now to show that we really need more nature to experience the calmness, to really help activate that parasympathetic nervous system. In 1984, it was reported that surgical patients who were assigned to rooms with windows overlooking natural scenery had shorter hospital stays and experienced fewer negative health outcomes than patients in rooms with windows facing the brick wall of a building. I know next time I'm in hospital, I'm definitely going to be trying to work out how to have a view of something natural. But what we see in nature, everything that whether it's walking through a forest, whether it's looking at the sea, whatever it is for us, it reduces our anger, it reduces our fear, it reduces our stress, and increases pleasant feelings. So the exposure to nature makes us feel better emotionally. It contributes to our physical well-being. It reduces blood pressure, reduces heart rate, muscle tension, the production of stress hormones. And as I say, it's activating our parasympathetic nervous system. And so what's really interesting now about research that's been done in the last couple of decades and even more recently is that laboratory studies comparing the effects of viewing photos or videos of natural environments have demonstrated the same physiological recovery effects of natural settings. So a lot of studies have been reporting improvements in stress and fatigue recovery and relaxation from viewing images and videos of natural settings. And more recently, studies are showing that viewing natural scenes through VR can lead to relaxation effects. And of course, there's lots more to be done on this, but for me, that's very exciting. As somebody who's already using VR with our clients for learning, the fact that we can now help activate their nervous system, their parasympathetic nervous system before they even start to learn so that they feel safe and relaxed is really exciting to me, that we can do this through VR and it doesn't matter where they are, whether they're in an office or at home. And finally, just to very briefly talk about mindfulness and meditation. So again, advances in imaging research have allowed scientists to demonstrate that activities such as meditation and mindfulness activate that parasympathetic nervous system. So that system, which is slowing down our heart rate and helping us to recover from stress. And of course, there are so many different approaches to meditation and mindfulness. And there's now so much evidence that meditation and mindfulness bring improvements in our physical and psychological well-being, our health, our attitudes, our behaviors. And either way, everything that we're talking about here, if you think about, a lot of people will talk about, I need to center myself. So centering ourselves, that centering experience is at the very heart of the parasympathetic nervous system. And so the main takeaways for me is that anything we can do to activate this parasympathetic nervous system in how we go about our days, in how we learn, in how we manage others, in how we are being managed, that will help us to tackle difficult times in a more centered way. And for me, VR is a safe place where we can learn, and we've been using it over the last few years with our clients, but also now knowing that we can get a break from our busy days where we won't be distracted by everything. For me, this is the power of VR, is that we're not distracted by the other things that are going on around us, whether it's tech, whether it's other people, whether it's our colleagues, whether it's children, and by taking breaks or learning in virtual reality, we all have the opportunity to learn and grow. So keep coming back to even just pay attention yourselves today. What am I doing to activate my parasympathetic nervous system and calm myself down?
Great, thanks for that, Steen. I think particularly now it's really interesting. People, we talk about the new normal, but there's nothing normal about the situation we're in. We're in the middle of a pandemic. We're working from home, we're stuck at home, we're, whatever it happens to be, we're using new technologies. We're all, to one degree or another, stressed. And a lot of people are a lot more stressed than they used to be. And a lot of people are a lot more tired than they used to be. Battling this all the time is tiring. So I think it's a very timely reminder that we can do things we don't necessarily, although it would be lovely if we could have the 2-week holiday in the sun, but we don't necessarily need to do that if we take 5 minutes, 10 minutes every day just to isolate ourselves, immerse ourselves in a wellness experience, whether that's in, SolasVR or taking time to take our shoes off and walk out into the garden, that can have a huge impact. So we don't need to spend huge amounts of money or even huge amounts of time, but we can just make that a discipline. And I think for corporates, people will look back and say, okay, you equipped me at home with an ergonomically designed chair or with, the best tech. What did you do to help my mental health? Because that's the real challenge. The first wave of COVID, the second wave, the third is going to be people going in to see their oncologists or their hip replacements or their ophthalmologists for cataracts and all that kind of thing. And the fourth wave is going to be mental health, and that's going to be huge. And anything we can do as individuals and companies to reduce that wave is going to be so much appreciated by the people that we're helping and impacting. So enough about that. Thank you, Celine, again, and thank you, James. So just as we do this poll, as we're starting to wrap up, just are you starting to see VR as a platform for existing and or new initiatives? We're just checking in with that. And really then, the last slide I'll put up now in a second is just for us, it's about starting the journey. This is like, having a conversation 20 years ago about the mobile phone and saying, sure, what would you do on it other than text people or ring them? Once it got out there, the use cases started to come, whether it's navigation or banking or games or whatever it is we're doing on them. And it's going to be the same with this. Let's get it out there, start to use it in a very benign way, I think, with SolasVR and some of the other training experiences that Celine and James talked about. I think it will become ubiquitous, and then the use cases will start to present themselves. So whether, it's about training or employee wellness, or it's part of your employer brand, part of your staff retention. And the bit, of course, we haven't had time to talk about today is customer connectivity. How much easier is it, to deal with customers if we're in the right frame of mind, for one thing, and we're properly trained and they're on the same wavelength as we are. So I think starting the journey will drive people's experiences. That in itself just creates demand. Staff and managers come up and say, oh, I thought about, and why don't we do this? And how about, and then we can create solutions around that. So we'd be delighted to talk to you about that. In the meantime, I know we've a few questions, and Leo, you might introduce some of those, and we might just talk about those if that's appropriate.
Sure, no problem, Stephen. There's a question here in from Janet. Does the fidelity have an impact on the learning effectiveness? For example, is there a big difference in the learning experience using VR, AR versus, say, 360 video?
James, do you want to maybe talk about
sure.
that?
It's a good question. We get asked that a lot. I think it depends. It depends what the training is. I would say that for, well-being, much as Stephen and the team have done, is the quality of that 360 video in there is really important, because you're trying to feel like you are wandering around the countryside or stood by a river, and get that sort of all that wellness from that. So that in that situation, it's very important. In other situations, depending on what you're trying to achieve, you don't need to go for incredibly high fidelity. So if it's computer generated imagery, which we use in our shell training, you don't have to have beautiful textures on the gas tank. You don't have to be able to look out to the sea and see beautiful ripples on the water. It needs to be good enough for what you're trying to achieve. So within an environment where you're having to perform tasks, you're spending less time looking around and more time actually interacting with the environment. I would argue with the sort of the Solas app, you're looking around and you're trying to, get yourself into the right state of mind. So therefore it does need to be, a well-filmed and reasonably high quality output. So very much dependent on what you're training and what you're trying to achieve.
Very good. There's another question in here, Stephen, from Tom. What metrics are you using to measure well-being, both individually and in aggregate?
Yeah, a lot of the. So we've got a study going on actually down in Cork CIT, where we've a group using the experiences, and we'll have some output from that, I think, at the end of this month or early October. So what we're not doing at the moment is doing the kind of clinical measurements like around heart rate or blood pressure or whatever. What we're doing is measuring people's perception of the benefits of using the tool. We know already, and Celine mentioned some of them there, is some of the scientific research that's been done around measuring the impact of whether it's the wellness or the training tools, and some of the case studies that we have there. We can forward on to Tom and highlight those. So, ones in the call center which talked about, the difference between taking a wellness break and taking a nutrition break, in terms of people's anxiety levels. And I think that went into heart rate and blood pressure and that kind of thing. So there's a lot of science out there. We're just collecting our own data at the moment, and we'll have some of those results at the end of September, beginning of October. Celine, I don't know if you wanted to add anything to that question.
I just think that, we're at the beginning of really using virtual reality in this way, and that it's, although, I think for me, what's really interesting is, as I said earlier, is how, research is finding that the same effects, we can have the same effects on our parasympathetic nervous system through experiencing nature in VR. And I guess the other thing for me is that, I know when I tried the headset for the first time with SolasVR, I was actually a little bit skeptical, to be honest, because I was like, well, if I already do a lot of meditation and mindfulness, and it's very important for my practice so that I can be useful for my own clients, never mind anything else. And it was interesting. And I was thinking, well, how is this really going to help me to take this break? And I was saying to Stephen and everyone last week that it was when I lay under the waterfall and I could feel my whole system just go, whew. Because how often do we get to lie under a waterfall? But there I was, and it really was, and I could really feel it. So I think, research on this, it's an evidence to really back all of this up, is going to take a while. But meanwhile, I've experienced it firsthand. So I say, everyone, just give it a go.
Yeah, no, I think that's it. Another question, sorry, that I just saw there was just just on the technical side, is just, does this create a challenge, for IT functions or others? And I suppose just the point on that is that actually delivering VR, either wellness or training, typically doesn't create any kind of huge burden for IT or other functions. It's relatively easy, to download stuff, either, as I said, from onto the mobile phones from the Play stores, or from the Oculus or the Pico stores, or our own platform or James's platform, are self-contained. They don't need much, if any, integration with the IT infrastructure within an organization, and we can look after all the GDPR and all that kind of stuff as well. Another question here: how do you tackle the downside of VR is dizziness to use it and the disassociation effect after using the kit? Yeah, I think that's a really good question, and it's interesting. It'd be interesting to get James's experience and Celine's, but I think there's less of an issue around that now as the technology is improving and people know how to A, set up the experiences better, and B, use the equipment better. So I don't know, James, did you want to answer anything on that? But I think that's our experience.
Yeah, it's an important consideration, and as you say, the technology is getting better. I mean, when the first headsets came out from Oculus, it was pretty poor, and that was largely because, simplistically, your eyes go before your head turns, so therefore there's a slight lag. So if you're not tracking on the eyes, then you're waiting for the head to turn, then there's a slight lag, and that can cause motion sickness, but that's largely gone away. My view of it is very much that there's a couple of factors. A, if you're the sort of person that gets motion sickness in cars, or in those sorts of scenarios, you may get some motion sickness using VR, but that's just something that is an unfortunate consequence, less of the technology, more of just how that person reacts. And I think so that's an important consideration. The other thing is how you create the experience. It's all about the user experience. And this is a really tricky area for VR, because it's not like you're working out the user experience for a website, and when someone clicks here, they need to be shown this or go back and forth. It's a really quickly developing area of VR. And by user experience, I mean, don't be whizzing people around different scenes, don't take them through a scene at high speed. Do it slowly. It's all these sorts of things. And if you have a poorly designed VR experience, then there's a reasonable chance you're going to feel ill. I've done some, actually I did the one on the PlayStation VR, which, I mean, is a game and it's for gamers, but it's a street luge. So you sit on a luge and you whiz through the streets and you're controlling it. I mean, I think actually I was looking at someone who was playing it, and I was looking on a screen, and I felt sick looking at the screen. So if you get the wrong experience, you're going to get some motion sickness. So it's got to be well designed, well thought through from user experience. And if you can do that with the improvement in the technology, as you mentioned, Stephen, it's a problem that's going to pretty much disappear.
Yeah, and I think probably in early days, people tried to do too much with them. That people, as you say, zipping around the place, and and it just highlights the impact of VR. We know we're standing still, and we know we're moving at the same time, and that's what makes us dizzy. Yeah. So I think people have produced better quality and more sympathetic experiences now, but we know what's causing for the main that dizziness. And as you said, there might always be a very small proportion of people who get car sick and who will get sick or feel dizziness in VR. But for most people, I think that's been reduced. I think we might just take one more question if we have one.
Yeah, sure. What do you think a good wellness program should look like? One that includes SolasVR, but I think it's something that is accessible for all. I think it's something that is, and what I mean by that is they can enter it into the conversation or the experience immediately without having to learn something to do it. I think it's something that is regular, and I think it's something that is actively supported by the company and the family, if you like. So if we're in a corporate environment, it's all very well. I know one organization who provided pool tables and breakout areas, and then the directors walked by them tut-tutting every time they saw somebody sitting in them. So it has to be supported, it has to be encouraged, and it has to be publicly endorsed. So people have to talk about the program. It has to become part of business as usual. So your weekly, your daily, your monthly meetings talking about figures and staff turnover or retention or whatever it is has to include a conversation about wellness, whether that's physical wellness, people doing couch to 5K, or mental health awareness. And that doesn't mean you have to jump in and say, James, really, how are you? It's like, Celine, tell me about your life. We don't have to get that heavy that quickly. But we do have to start the conversation and acknowledge that we're starting the conversation. So I think they're the rules for what a good wellness program looks like for me. And then obviously it's just depending on the individuals and the age profile and the location, you can design something, but I think it has to be supported, open, accessible, and honest. I think are the drivers for me. Selena, this is your area as well. Did you want to add anything to that before?
Yeah, I mean, just to add, just to reiterate, the things that activate that sympathetic nervous system, the things that put us into that fight or flight are, when things are really important to us, when things are uncertain, when we feel like we're being observed or judged by somebody else. Yes. So you can put the most amazing wellness program in place, but if your line managers don't know how to coach and to really have those conversations and to really think about, well, am I actually putting too much pressure on this person or even not enough pressure on this person? It's about knowing each individual. So you can have the most amazing wellness program, but if you don't have your line managers bought into wellness, then you can forget about it.
Yeah. Okay. No, listen, thanks for that. And just finally, thank you everybody for joining our webinar this morning. I hope you found it useful. We're going to finish up on that. I think we've just one last kind of ask, which is just basically, if you want us to contact you after this, either, ourselves or Celine or James, just to talk to you in more detail, just let us know. And then we've a survey that we'll ask you to complete as well. I think it's four or five questions. So I'd just like to thank you guys for attending the survey. I particularly like to thank Celine and James for taking the time out to contribute to this. I certainly found what they said really, really interesting, and I hope you did as well. So as I said, the poll is there, and then we can just let us know if you want to get more details. And other than that, thank you so much for your time today. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Stephen. Thanks, everyone.